Alrighty, so we did the Labyrinth today, live on stream. If you would like to see the full Labyrinth runs and everything like that, we only had to do two, so it wasn't particularly, like, super difficult for me. I did get a pretty lucky run on, the second one that I did with getting some good characters and everything, but there's a couple of things that I just wanted to go over, mainly, like, the pathway that I took, and maybe a little bit about the bosses, because there are some interesting, sort of quirks to each of the floors here, and you do get a lot of extra just passives in general. You actually just get Reinhardt's passive, which is just kind of crazy in of itself. You actually get basically a rotating sort of buff. So every time a turn starts, you basically are going to swap around between 5 different buffs. The big ones being Immortality is one. You can get debuff immunity. There's an all stats increase, a damage dealt increase, and I want to say there's one more, but it's an evasion stack actually, which is kind of nice too sometimes. So honestly, the evasion or the immortality actually came in handy quite a few times, because later in the run I was actually able to get the overcome crisis passive, which is, if you don't know, it's one of the bird passives where if you survive with 10% or less HP, you basically just full heal, purge debuffs, and you get a huge stat increase, which came in handy a couple of different times, because if I just got lucky and the character that they were targeting had immortality on them, they wouldn't die, they would do enough damage to proc the passive every time, and then I would just basically full heal, easy peasy. The starting characters on this thing are actually pretty interesting, so you actually get to start with these 3 characters right here. You do not have to worry about having specific characters or anything. This game mode relies on, they pretty much already have everything predetermined on, like, which characters are available to you. Obviously, in your runs themselves, there is RNG factors that can kind of screw you over here and there when it comes to actually pulling characters that you need. For my specific run that I did, where it actually went well, I basically took Goddess Liz every time, because if you don't know, this is the red Goddess Liz. She's a spring seasonal unit that basically every time you attack, you're going to get an attack-related stats buff, which is just super helpful overall. I ended up sort of, in the second run that I did, transitioning into a full Goddess team, because I got lucky with pulling Mael in one of my runs, and honestly, if you get Mael, you're basically good to go. So in this first run that I did, it didn't go super well. I took the left path on floor 1, which ended up kind of screwing me a little bit, and I just really didn't get any of the really good characters that I needed. I ended up pulling a couple of different catastrophe units, which wasn't great. You can see here I ended up going for Green Valenti. This is the Awakened Valenti. That wasn't particularly what I would call good, and then once I got to Meliodas down here towards the end, because I only had 2 characters on my roster at the time, I was not able to out-CC. I was hoping that it was going to be like the blue SR melee, where you can attack into him once and get rid of his stance, and then you can attack him with other characters, but you can see the only reason that I was even surviving here was because I pulled Immortality as my passive. So definitely recommend getting, at the very least, you need 3 characters if you're going to go into this fight right here. It just helps a lot. For the run that I actually did, I ended up having Escanor on my team as well, and I did have Shin also, and I don't really think that Shin was the greatest character. I did, one of my mods was telling me before I picked Shin, or after I had already picked Shin, that having an extra green character might not have been great, because you can see up here that Meliodas is a red unit, so that's not ideal, but overall, I was basically just able to sort of bait out attacks. If I got enough attacks off with the Shin here, I was pretty much able to rank up my cards, which was kind of nice. Just attacking with Goddess Liz first, so that way she can get the attack-related stats off and everything, and Escanor does a pretty good amount of damage anyway. So one of the other things that's really nice is if you actually lose a character during this season of Labyrinth, you'll actually it'll steal your ultimate move gauge, but it'll rank all of your cards up by 1 level. So you can see kind of in the background as I'm reading those, Shin is getting a little bit pulverized. I'm pretty sure he ended up dying in this phase, and you can see right here he dies during this phase. There's also some Ignite stacks that get applied. I didn't really pay attention to that too much, but obviously every little bit helps. So you can see I die, all of my cards get ranked up. I have a level 3 Escanor in hand, which is really nice, and he's already pretty much super close to dead. You don't have to worry about him reviving or anything, which is really nice, but as long as you can kind of just attack to him enough to whittle him down, and then finish him off with a really good move that you don't have to worry about the counter too much, that is obviously ideal. Bit of RNG, of course, like always. There was a couple of people in my chat saying that they weren't able to get past melee, like they were having a hard time with it. But honestly, if you stick to the right path, I did go left on the very beginning of it, and it kind of screwed me a little bit because the battle before you fight the boss on the stage, if you're on the left path, it's like a big dragon who actually ends up dealing a really good amount of damage, and you would kind of like to avoid that if possible. I think on the right side it was like Twiggo, Alioni, and Gil Thunder, so it was like kind of like a meme team almost. And it was much more manageable. So if you can go for the right path, I definitely recommend that. Just the biggest thing that I can recommend you do, I think a lot of people just have trouble with Labyrinth in general. I think they can't get their heads around the fact that you just need to focus on levels and awakening as much as possible. Get as much stats on your units as you possibly can. I understand that the passives and the characters are completely random, but just take what you can. Try not to lock yourself down too much. The very first run that I had, I think I just ended up screwing myself over because I went for the first passive was like increased damage for, depending on how many female characters are in the game or like on my team. So that's obviously not good because I'm, locking myself down to only like, technically 50% of the roster or whatever. I mean, I guess technically it's not the right word, but only 50% of the characters in the game can be used because obviously there's a lot of male characters. I would say there's actually probably more male characters if I had to guess, but I don't know that for sure. So getting passives that are going to lock you down to using either specific units, specific races, specific genders, I guess, is just not really what you're looking for. You want to kind of go broad so that way as you're sort of going through and you're getting to these stages where you're pulling new characters, you can kind of be a little bit more flexible with it. You can kind of take what it is that you get sort of dealt, and then you can sort of adapt to that. I had Shin dead for quite a while, actually, so I was pretty much able to just go through and beat this with just those two characters for a little while up until I was able to finally pull another character here. You can see that during this phase, I actually ended up pulling Margaret as one of my choices. Honestly, I mean, if you can get a festival character in general, most of the time they're going to do really well. Surprisingly, Margaret ended up dealing really good damage. I was actually very shocked at how well she was doing on some of the regular stages, but once it came to the depths, Margaret became pure support. She really wasn't helping with damage pretty much at all. Her charge card does pretty okay during the actual floors, but when it came to the depths, she was doing very low damage. So she is really good for support. Obviously, she has a really nice blue card that increases damage dealt and reduces damage taken, which is great. So just sort of taking what you get. Like, obviously, if I got, dealt a specific demon, for example, then I could be like, hey, I could maybe potentially set up for a demon team here. Obviously, it's all RNG, so it's not what you want to hear, but sometimes when you go through, if you lock yourself down to using something too specific, you have much more chance of getting out RNG'd by the game, and it's not going to give you what you actually want. I got super lucky. The next character that I ended up pulling was Festival Deanne, which was just amazing for tanking. Her plus Goddess Liz. The Goddess Liz has the same ultimate as the blue one, so you can actually just use that in general to sort of make sure that you're healing up to full if you have the chance to sort of like piddle around for a couple of extra turns, try to rush an ultimate so that way you can heal instead of having to worry about going to a healing space or spending extra points in the shop to heal your characters. That's obviously ideal. Having her and Deanne on the same team was great. You can see here, I went on the right path for floor 2, and I am having to deal with this big monster, so if you want to maybe go for the left path, that might work out better for you. I think the big problem with the floor layouts on this one, or I don't want to call it a problem necessarily, but there's a shop and then a character space, and then on the other side they're swapped, so it's the character space first and then the shop. So I guess it just really depends on what you need. If you're missing a character, going to the shop might potentially have a revive or a heal, whereas if you go to the character space, you're pretty much going to be replacing the dead character instead of actually rezzing them. So if you like the team that you already have, going for the character space might not be the greatest idea, but yeah, just going to those. Make sure that you check passives and characters when you go to the shops. That's another really big thing that I feel like people might not be doing enough of, because you can go into the character space, see who's available. If it's not good, just back out, go into the passive section, see what's good there, and you definitely want to check them even if there's a good character. There could be an insane passive as well, so just making sure that you know what all kind of options you have. If you already have a team that's really catered towards the Angel team, for for example, or just like crit damage or whatever the case may be, you know, don't necessarily be like, hey, I just need to grab a character instead. Like, if there's a really good passive that's like, hey, increases crit chance while you're trying to go for a crit build, that's obviously very, very good. So just, you know, be aware of the options that you have. Don't rush into things. Don't just try to lock yourself in. I think that's one of the biggest issues. Obviously, sometimes it works out fantastically, and you can get sort of these like ultra specific teams, but that's all RNG. You can't really like you can't really just say this game mode's easy. Just build the Archangel team forehead, because I mean you might not get dealt the Archangel team. You know what I mean? So in that scenario, you want to just make sure that your options are broad. Like, I didn't go for any race-specific passives when I was going through, which normally I would say if you're going to go for like a farming team or something specific, you would normally want to go for like a specific race team and something that you can build with a lot of synergy and everything. But for me specifically, I just kind of ended up falling into the Archangel team and just taking whatever passives I could get. Another big thing is the bosses. The floor 2 boss is actually a Bon, and he plays a lot kind of like the final boss Bon, which is pretty interesting, where he has this passive where if you're fighting him and he's below, or you're gonna kill him, if he has 4 ultimate move gauges or higher, he's actually going to lose the ultimate move gauge and just like res himself. So in this scenario, I can't remember exactly how this played out, but I basically was able to get him to ult me, I think it was. So he lost all of his ultimate move gauge, and then I just did a big attack here. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Margaret ended up doing really well here, but yeah, that was very, very nice. It just kind of ended up working out pretty well. But if you want to see the full run for that, it's obviously up on the channel. It is a live stream. I did already put timestamps on it, so that should help a little bit. But yeah, the Bon was... I could see him being a really big issue for some people, and if you don't have the right team kind of built for it. So you can see I popped the res there with the ultimate move gauge, and then luckily I had good enough damage with the ult. You don't want to ult like too fast or anything, because if you ult and they have... or if they have the fact that they're going to revive here, then it's basically just going to heal them right back up to full, which is super, super unfortunate. The other thing that you might want to know is with Escanor specifically. Escanor ended up being pretty tough as an opponent. He basically has this this part to his passive where if you get him below 30% HP, he is going to gain invincibility for 2 turns. So I kind of was just testing out my damage with each character. He was obviously dealing a really good amount of damage to my characters as well, so you do want to be very conscious of that. But overall, I was able to put up the attack-related stats, get a decent card in hand. Level 1 cards on Escanor have an 80% damage reduction, so you want to try to merge into a level 2 if possible, and then you can see once I had Mael, obviously, Mael's insane with a Goddess team, so I was able to use a level 2 card there to pretty much kill without having to worry about the invincibility, which was super, super nice. So that's basically all the tips I have for you. I know that obviously a lot of this is RNG. It happens, but once you can get through your first floor, or like your first like run of it, and you can get the rewards for it, you can reset, use characters that are a lot better for it, and then sort of like build out a better farming team, so that way you can one-shot the depths each time. So at this point, I have already sort of like done the entire, you know, exchange shop and everything, but you know, it might, you know, it just takes some time. It takes a lot of grinding. There's just some luck involved, like with everything in this game. So that's pretty much it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Feel free to subscribe if you have not already, and I will see you guys in the next one.